Hi, this is Victor Pacini, and welcome to the Victim to Victor podcast.
So people ask me, they're like, hey, Victor, how have you been able to overcome the fact that you were sexually abused and overcome the fact that your father was a violent alcoholic and you made a decision to not follow in his footsteps? How are you able to have positive relationships and to live a life that's pretty successful? And I think success for me is just trying every day to not be better than anyone, just to be better than I was the day before. And that's something called true nobility, which is a great idea, a great concept. And I learned that from Dr. Dyer. So that's the key to me for success, is to find people that are living positive lives and just see what they're doing and kind of model it. But one day I sat down after someone asked me, like, what have you done to overcome these past pains? And actually there are 4 steps or 4 strategies that I actually came up with that I actually went through. And I didn't know I was going through them at the time, but I put them on paper, and I'd like to share the 2 with you in this video right now, in this podcast. The first one is, and I talked a little bit about it in the last episode, is that you have to make a decision. You have to decide how you want to live your life. Do you want to, live in the pain and have a victim mindset for the rest of your life? And there are people that do that. Or do you want to say, you know what, I'm going to take responsibility for myself and I'm going to find a way to not live in the pain anymore. And if that requires me to surround myself with people that can help me, and counselors and therapists and positive people, then so be it. So that's a huge strategy right there. You have to decide. No one else has to do it for you. You have to do it. And number 2, the second strategy is that you have to take ownership. And what do I mean by that? I mean, I share these ideas with students all around, and I say, what does taking ownership mean? And I'll get students that raise their hand and say, to take control, to be responsible. And that's correct. But I also say something very specific, is that you don't want to blame yourself for what has happened in your past. I mean, if you are a victim of domestic violence or had an alcoholic parent or whatever the case is, you don't blame yourself. And I think that's really, really important. So many people blame themselves, and it keeps them from moving forward. So this is how I look at it, and this is the lesson for today, is to take ownership. And I look at my life like this. When it comes to specifically living my life in a survivor mentality mindset, when it comes to my abuse, I take this like specific sentence. It's like a mantra, and I say this: he abused my body, but I refuse to let him abuse my life. And this is where I ask students, I'll say, okay, let's break it down, let's chunk it down. He abused my body. What tense is that? And they'll all yell out, that's the past tense, right? So he abused my body. Can I go backwards and change it? Can I rewind it and not show up to that house that day? Unfortunately, I can't. So I give him that. He abused my body. But I refuse to let him abuse my life. What tense is that? That's present and future. So if you think about it, if I were to write it on a piece of paper, I would chunk it down like this. My past is a very small part of my life timeline, right? And then my present is bigger, and my future is even bigger, right? So even though we can't predict the future, we don't know how long we're here for, we can still have a vision in our minds of what we want to accomplish. So I make my future really, really big, right? And I make my present very, very big, and my past is small. So I get students and adults to look at their life and say, where are you right now? Are you looking at your life as your past is like this big chunk of time, and your present small because you're living all your life in present moments, but you're living it in your mind in the past? So you're not being present right now, and you're thinking about that past on a constant basis. And then your future, you can't really have a vision for yourself because you're stuck in the past. So taking ownership is saying, hey, he abused my body, but I refuse to let him abuse my life. My father hurt my family with his alcoholism, but I refuse to do the same thing to my family. So if you chunk it like that, it really, really puts things in perspective. It's like, take ownership and really, really be mindful of this timeline. I think it's so important. And I learned a little bit of this, or actually a lot of this, from one of my coaches. His name is Dan Sullivan, and he talks about making your future bigger than your past and decide what you want from your past to come along. Now, when I say, he abused my body, that's negative. All the negative stuff, I'm using that as material for me to grow. But all the good stuff, oh my gosh, I keep that with me all the time. So if I were to say my past, my positive past, it'd be really, really big. So it's all on how you look at it. That's the key to the whole thing. That's the key to success, is how you view yourself in these situations. And that's it. That's a victim to victor mindset. And again, I stress this over and over again. It has to start with you, or it doesn't start at all.